Hello, everyone. So today we'll talk about essential worker safety. Nick, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Marcio. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, very excited to be here with you and Steve today.
Thank you both. And Nick, if we could start with you, just for folks that might not be familiar with you in the audience, if you can share just your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nick Trublick. I'm the Business Operations Director for Animal Nutrition in North America for Cargill. 21 years with Cargill, predominantly in the United States. 18 of those 21 years based here in the U.S. and spent 3 years where I lived in the Netherlands and was responsible for Europe, Middle East, Russia, Africa, India, and South Korea. So I had a nice stint overseas, but sure glad to be home. Today, my scope of responsibility is we have 70 animal nutrition locations within the U.S. and Canada, and business operations is really around servicing the customer, environmental health and safety, food safety, quality, and regulatory. And then we have this manufacturing excellence group that's really around build right, maintain right, and controlling costs. So driving that continuous improvement culture. So a great career, get to work with a great group of people, and you'll get to hear from Steve Edmonds, who's one of my colleagues today, who's great in the EH&S space.
I love it. One question here before we jump to Steve's background, Nick, I want to know, what was your biggest lesson traveling to all those countries that you've been to?
Yeah, so for me, maybe biggest lesson and thing that made the biggest impact on me is, regardless of what country you're in, people are really great all over the world. People want to do the right thing. I think working for Cargill, we use we have the best people in the industry or in the world, and I can just tell you, traveling to over 40 countries in my career and interacting with people, everybody wants to do the best job that they possibly can every single day. So it gives me a nice perspective on life and the world that people are great.
I love it. Thanks for that. And Steve, how about you? How about your journey so far?
Okay, well, I've actually been with Cargill for 15 years, Marcio. I've been in the environmental health and safety field for about 35 years. I was late coming to Cargill. I often tell my friends and my family, I sure wish I'd have found Cargill 15 or 20 years sooner than I did, because of some of the things that Nick shared and its commitment to its people. I've worked in our plants. I've also been responsible for health and safety for our North American starches and sweeteners business, as well as our North American protein manufacturing businesses. My current role is Environmental Health and Safety Director for our eastern region of the United States, as well as a little bit of the Caribbean. And I've been doing that for just a couple months, actually. But even in all those roles and with other organizations, one of the things that keeps me very enthusiastic and happy to come to work every day is knowing that I'm working with an organization that puts people first and want to make sure that our folks get home to their families at the end of every day, safe and ready to enjoy their family and able to provide for them. So that I share that it's important for me, and I know that it's important for Cargill.
That's a great segue here, Steve, to get really dive into this topic of worker safety. And Nick, let's focus a little bit on the feed mill side of things, and then we can transition later here for Steve more on the packing plant side of things. So from a feed mill standpoint, what was implemented in relation to temperature screening of employees?
Yeah, Marcio, thanks for the question. I think, one of the consistencies that you'll find between Steve and I's answer is we're fairly standardized of what we're doing in Cargill regarding all the safety protocols for COVID. It's just really around the size and the scope of the facility around, what technologies that we have. So, for instance, within our feed mills, we can have anywhere from 3 people on a shift up to 30 people on a shift, right? And Steve will talk talk through some of the large numbers that we have in the packing plant. But from a temperature screening perspective, as soon as we heard about the outbreak in China, we were very reactive, and we were able to get the handheld temperature guns that you scan over the top of people's temple to take their temperature. As time has evolved, we've been able to work with some of our technology partners, and we have infrared cameras. So basically, we have an infrared camera at each one of the entrances prior to someone coming in the facility, and these infrared cameras you can walk through and they scan a person's temperature, and if it's above that 99 degrees, it will give a beep sound. That beep sound indicates that we need to go to secondary screening and notifies the employee that they're above average on temperature. So the great thing about these infrared cameras is they don't have to be manned, meaning they're very small, and you can actually have an HDMI cable running to a display monitor to show you, hey, this was the person that was temperature was elevated.
Very interesting. And those work pretty well from being sensitive and those sorts of things.
Yeah, they really do. So the calibration is obviously really important when you first install them to get them right. And we've had we haven't had any mechanical issues, but we still have the old-fashioned temperature guns that if they happen to not be working correctly, we can always go back to them.
Awesome. How about from a more cleaning or sanitation standpoint?
Yeah, so from a sanitation perspective, I think the first component of sanitation is really mapping out the common areas within the facility. So this really comes back to our social distancing practices, and what we did really early in the process is mapping out where we're going to have common areas in our facilities. So some of the common areas could be the time clock room, the break room, the restrooms, where we have our shift meetings. And that's really forced us to think differently about how we do those things, right? So, for instance, prior to COVID, we would have a morning shift meeting, an afternoon shift meeting, and an evening shift meeting at each one of our facilities. And some of these areas that we get together in are very small. So for sure, we wouldn't be able to adhere to social distancing. So we've had to come up with different practices to where maybe now we do that in a warehouse to where we display it on a projector, and we have X's on the floor to where people are further than 6 feet apart, that you can do your communication of what needs to be done for the day. Now, back to your question on sanitation. Any of the areas that we have common people, or we have we can't adhere to social distancing, they are cleaned once a day thoroughly by those operators and totally disinfect those areas. And then when that shift begins, the next shift also disinfects that area. So you kind of have that duplication where you clean at the beginning and at the end of your shift. That way you don't have any kind of community spread.
Very good. From a social distance standpoint, you mentioned the meetings, right, on the warehouse, and anything else that you find was interesting or implemented from that standpoint?
Yeah, so what I say, and this kind of goes back to my comment around people are great and they always want to do well, right? So it's really easy for a director of my site to go in and say, hey, we need to implement social distancing. Well, what that does initially is it complicates our operators' lives, meaning, well, if I can't do that, then how am I going to get my job done? The great thing about what we've been able to see from our employees is their continuous improvement mindset, and we've had a lot of best practices and efficiencies come out of, well, if I can't go to this common area, well, I'm going to create a new common area with a computer screen to where I can see what's going on, and then I don't have to walk another 25 steps. I can just turn around and look at this specific computer screen to check to see if my bin is empty, or if I need to print tags, I'm going to move this entire tag machine over here. That way I don't have to go into the control room. So it's been really fun to see. I think the initial gap was within the communication, but after 10 months, I would say our teams have done really well at overcoming the communication gaps.
And that's amazing, because if you think about, these days, everyone wearing masks and those things, which helps, of course, for COVID, but also helps for other diseases. So it's interesting to see that this change is probably going to stick around, which is good.
Yeah, your point's really valid, Marcio. I think I've had the ability to tour a couple facilities over the last 10 months, and I would just say I feel and I have empathy for our employees that have to wear masks every single day, especially with their safety glasses, because we know you get to working hard to whether you're cutting in bags or you're stacking pallets or unstacking pallets. That heat has to release somewhere, and if you go too fast, you tend to fog up those glasses. But I just want to say to all the workers out there that are working hard every single day, thank you, and you're still being recognized for the great job that you're doing to service our customers.
Yeah, right. You have the essential workers from the hospital side of things, but also from the food side of things, and that's really what they are doing. Very good. Nick, any final thoughts relative to staff safety and COVID at the feed mill?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is those protocols work, and we have found them extremely effective. That the self-screening is probably most important. Our teammates and our employees, when you're not feeling right, so trigger on that and don't come to work sick. Right. I think the second thing, this temperature screening and asking the questions around, have you been around someone that's sick or that's had exposure to COVID? I think asking those every single day to fight complacency is really important. I think the temperature screening is a clear indicator, and as you had mentioned, that can be a preventer to get prevent people from being sick and other illnesses as well. And then really following the mask and the social distancing, that works. And then last but not least, the sanitation point, and be sure that you have those strict schedules and you're inspecting what you're expecting.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nick. We'll come back to you here at the end, but let's transition from the feed mill to the packing plants. Steve, you're expert on the packing plant side of things. What's been done from active screening standpoint?
Well, it's an interesting question, and Nick's exactly right. From a practice standpoint, our policies and practices are the same, whether we're in a feed mill or in a packing plant within Cargill. It really becomes a matter of scope, Marcio. So we may have several hundred people entering one of our packing plants at the start of a shift. So the plants have worked extremely hard at staggering shifts so that first shift people coming into work aren't meeting third shift people leaving work, as an example, so that we have gaps of time between to kind of prevent that mass gather of people and promote the social distancing capability. So we've staggered our work shifts. We've also set up our screening areas with social distancing capabilities. So we've created walkways, handrails, markings on the floor to create that 6-foot mark, and people are very aware of that, and they're quite good and helpful at complying with that and maintaining social distance through that process. We also use thermal scanning, and we also ask a series of questions as provided by the CDC or our local, state, or city requirements if they have something beyond or above what the CDC wants us to do. And if we have somebody who screens out on that, they go to secondary screening. We're in a packing plant. We have health professionals that will meet with them and review additional information and ask more detailed questions and make the determination whether they can proceed to the workplace or whether they need to be asked to leave and go home and follow up with their primary care physician. So we've worked really hard at setting that process up to help people move smoothly so they're not standing in lines a long time. We have some of our facilities, in all honesty, that do that as a drive-through. And so they have a person that comes in a car and they screen them in their car. And if a trigger is met, they'll actually take the car and drive to another area and have another person meet them to do that secondary screening in a car. So our facilities, following the same requirements, have created some innovative ways to meet the needs of their individual facilities as well. I think one thing we have in our packing plants that's kind of unique from a communication standpoint is the need to meet multiple language needs. So through that screening process, through that communication process, whether it be posters, whether it be CCTV ads, whether it be actual interpreters, our sites have worked extremely hard to meet the language needs of our employees to try to avoid confusion or misunderstanding.
Very interesting. From a social distance standpoint, you mentioned a few things. Anything else to add? I mean, packing plants are extremely efficient places.
They are.
Right. How did that how did that change with social distance and anything else that we implemented from that standpoint?
Sure, it's changed significantly, 𝗪𝗁𝘁. So we have looked at all of our facilities, and we have put in place plexiglass barriers, if you will, between our employees to create that barrier where we couldn't get a minimum of 6 feet between workstations. And we've done an extensive amount of installation of those barriers. We also, where we can't meet that, we have face mask and face shield requirements to where we can't keep people 6 feet away. We've also done a lot of work in our hallways. So we've put in handrails as an example and created one-way traffic flows for people so that we're not bumping into each other. We've physically separated the break rooms with barriers so that people can sit at a table and be protected from others, or protect themselves from others from themselves while they're having lunch. We've had some plants that have created red tag, green tag approaches where they sit down in the break room for their lunch, and there'll be a red tag or a green tag there. It was green when they sat down. When they get up and leave, they'll flip that over to red, and another person will know they can't use that until it's been sanitized. So we'll have people in our break rooms constantly moving and sanitizing those common areas, whether they be the tables, the chairs, doorknobs, handrails, microwaves, whatever the case might be. So we've done an extensive amount of separating people as much as we can. If we can't, implementing protective equipment solutions, and then also staggering the starts and stops of people to try to maintain as much distance as we can.
Anything else from a hygiene and disinfection standpoint? You mentioned the red and green, and that's pretty cool. In Brazil, we have, you might be familiar with the churrascarias, or well, in US you have 𝗴𝗂𝗍𝗁, right? The steakhouses. Yep. and you have the green and the red for more meat, less meat. But so it's funny that triggers that memory. But anything else from hygiene or disinfection standpoint?
Well, I would say we have people who are dedicated throughout the course of their day to performing sanitation duties. So we constantly have people working around the facility in common areas, cleaning things and disinfecting things, as well as what Nick talked about with nightly sanitation, weekly deep cleans, and self-sanitation. So that sanitation piece and the education of employees on what they can do to help with that has become extremely important in our packing plants.
How about from a communication and education standpoint, Steve?
Well, that's we kind of touched on that a little bit. We have had to get pretty creative at times about being able to communicate and meet or touch and connect with all of our employees. So we have probably doubled, at least, if not more, the number of monthly safety meetings. As an example, we might have a facility have every month. So we don't want to lose that connection point of promoting the safety and well-being of our people and the role that our folks play in that. So we continue to have those, but instead of a group of 40, we'll have a group of 10 in a bigger room so they can social distance. And so we're having significantly more of them, Marcio, and at the same time, meeting the needs of language barriers, interpretation, or interpreters, etc. So that's been pretty challenging for us, but people have been open to it and willing to go that extra mile, if you will, to make sure we can keep that communication flowing. Our big plants rely a lot on multi-language posters, constant scrolling of TV information, if you will, or information on TV in multiple languages. And the other thing that I think is kind of unique is we have a lot of messaging that takes place that speaks no language. It's all done through visual cues that are meant to mean the same regardless of a person's language. And those seem to be fairly effective at connecting to groups of very diverse people.
Interesting. How about, Steve, you have any final thoughts on staff safety relative to COVID at the packing plant level? Sure.
One of the things we always get concerned about, Marcio, is COVID's been with us a long time. And, it started in March in our business where we started implementing a lot of controls that we continue to try to improve and make better. Over time, we always have the opportunity for drift and what becomes the new normal. So I think it's extremely important that we're reviewing what we're doing, looking at its effectiveness. We do conduct daily COVID, we can call them inspections or audits. We like to call them observations. How are people doing with their face masks? Do our barriers look like they're correct and the right dimensions, and are they effective? And part of that is to be visible, but part of it is to keep what we're working with in the forefront and the challenges that COVID brings to our workplace, to try to promote that with folks so that we don't see drift. It's important today. It's just as important as it was 6 months ago, and we've got to work through this together, and this is one way we can help make that happen. So I think that follow-up and reinforcement and preventing the drift is something that's extremely important for our packing plants.
Very good. I wanted to get a little philosophical here, right? With the distancing and the masks and the barriers and all those things. Do you notice any, I don't know what's the word, right? If it's not the engagement, but I mean, people are people, right? Yep. So we like that connection. So there's less people connection, right? So the question is, do we need to be doing, or are you doing, or should we start thinking about extra things we should do just to keep, the team engaged among them?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. And the answer is yes. And I think one of the challenges we faced through this whole COVID time period is the wear and tear it can take on us mentally and socially, right? We are social creatures by habit, which is a good thing. We enjoy other people's company, and we're definitely impacting that in a negative way. So we have done a lot of outreach and communication and education on the resources available to our employees and their families on how to deal with that, how to cope, whether it be a webinar, whether it be hotline numbers that people can call for support. So we have a lot of people who are really focused on making sure people understand the resources available through Cargill to help them through those types of challenges. I'd give another example. So in the facility I work in, they have an annual Christmas party. Well, they've had to cancel the Christmas party for obvious reasons, right? But what they have done is provided employees with tickets to do a drive-through in a local community of all the Christmas lights. And then across the road, they set up a spot for Santa to sit and hand out presents to the employees' children, right? And so, yeah, we're not together as a group, but it's still that connection point of we're still Cargill, we're still one, we're working through this together, and we're all still valued. And I think that's extremely important.
I love it. Any insights on that last topic here, Nick?
Yeah, I think Steve said it well, and since we're philosophical, I'll chime in here as well. But I mean, anytime you're wearing a mask and you're not able to see people for people, you're somewhat dehumanizing just the general environment. I think about you going to the grocery store. How many times have you been bumped into the grocery store and somebody may not say, "Hey, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that." And really, if you dehumanize, you think of things as objects, right? So I think anything you can do, to Steve's point, to really see people for people and check in on their psychological safety and really get back to, we're all people in the end, and we want to do the right thing. And I think that's really important. So good topic. I'm glad you asked the question.
Awesome. And then the last question I have for both of you, Steve, first could be, if you could write something on a billboard for everyone to see around the globe, what would that say?
Specific to COVID, Marcio?
Your call.
Anything?
Anything.
That's a really interesting question. If I think about the COVID theme, I think the billboard would say, COVID is real. Take care of you, help take care of me, and our loved ones will stay safe.
Awesome. I love it. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think, follow the protocols and this will be gone soon enough.
I love it. Amazing. Steve, Nick, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time here today, and see you soon.
Thank you, Marcio. It's a pleasure.
Thanks.